Welcome back to another episode of STEM and Stilettos with your host, Zofia Morales. I am so excited to be here today. We are going to discuss some amazing topics with Kerri Hummingbird, who I will introduce shortly, and some thought questions for you as we're moving into this is think a little bit about whose game you're playing. Are you really playing the game that is going to create satisfaction in your life? Are you playing someone else's game and climbing some ladder that's leaned against their random wall? So that's some of the questions we're going to dig into as we're here today. Both I and my guest have some really interesting backgrounds in terms of coming out of the tech world and the science world and moving into some more spiritual and psychologically based services in this world. And I'm moving back kind of more towards a balanced center where I'm working with both worlds and bringing all of myself to the table. I was once a data center manager in a Fortune 100 company, handling their global IT systems operations. And Kerri has worked in Silicon Valley and Austin, Texas in high-tech communications, specializing in programmer and development documentation. So we know of which we speak. We've been out there and we've walked the walk. One of the things I'd like to invite you to do, because this is a participatory thing, if you're hearing us here on Facebook or on YouTube, please go ahead and shoot out a shout out in the comments and just say, hey, we hear you. We would love to interact with you. If you have questions for us, we would love to receive some of those and respond to those as we are going live here today. So with that out of the way, I'm going to introduce my guest a little bit more thoroughly. So Kerri Hummingbird is a medicine woman, a mother, and a mentor, and the founder of Inner Medicine Training, a mystery school that shares potent ancient traditions from the Andes and the Himalayas for owning your wisdom and living your purpose. Prior to living her soul's purpose, she worked in Silicon Valley and Austin, Texas as a high-tech communications consultant, specializing in programmer and development documentation for distributed computing. Since her high-tech days, she's become an international best-selling author of several books, including Inner Medicine, Becoming One with Mother Earth for the Survival of Humanity, on the charts over 50 weeks, Love is Fierce, Healing the Mother Wound, and The Second Wave, Transcending the Human Drama, on the international charts for over 279 weeks. Congratulations. And the award-winning best-selling book, Awakening to Me, One Woman's Journey to Self-Love, which describes the early years of her spiritual awakening. As the host of the Soul Nectar Show, Ms. Hummingbird inspires people to lead their lives wide awake with an authenticity, passion, and purpose that positively impacts others. As a healer and a mentor, she catalyzes mind shifts to transform life challenges into the gifts of wisdom. Welcome, Kerri. I am so thrilled to have you here with me today.
I always love our conversation, Sophia. It's really beautiful to be here again. And for this audience too, which is new.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about your background. Can you flesh out a little bit more what your experience was like working in Silicon Valley? I think that's where you started, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, my first real job after college was in Silicon Valley. I worked for a number of different computer companies, and I started off just at a company that actually went out of business after the first couple of years I was there. And I had my
Not
own
an
office
uncommon
and
experience.
everything. Yeah, but it was a good introduction. I was on a documentation team. Like we had style meetings and it was very official and it was quite an experience. My interview with them was actually like six senior technical writers and the manager all interviewing me at the same time as like a 23, 22-year-old.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like
a little intimidating.
a little intimidating, but because I could stand up to that, they said, okay, we're going to hire you. And within a month of starting my job, I actually got into leadership with the Society for Technical Communication. So people in Silicon Valley know STC, Society of Technical Communication. I was on the leadership team there in the Valley, and I was planning curriculums that 300 or more people were coming to, and I was standing up in front of them and telling them about our speaker. And so right away, I was opening up that, that professional context, the networking context. an entrepreneurial kind of spirit, like right from the beginning. Like no matter what job I have, I'm going to know a lot of people and I'm going to be able to maneuver around this crazy valley and get good opportunities. And I'm out for myself. Like I'm going to advance. And so that's kind of, a picture. I worked at a number of different startups. The last one I worked, well, I don't know if the last one I worked for, but the last company I worked for was into distributed computing. So this was at the beginning of when we were starting to see the internet and websites and applications that you could use to perform activities like Facebook, for example.
Yes.
Before that existed, there needed to be a backbone infrastructure to enable the data to transfer around between the different hubs, the different centers, the different computers,
Exactly. The stuff we take for granted now and that Al Gore claimed responsibility for. Yes.
Yeah, so I was there in the early days of that. I was there like in 1992 working on, distributed computing, and I'm working with people who had graduated from Stanford and were really well-regarded, engineers who were also like just like hippie kids or something. But anyway, they were doing amazing work, and I was right there documenting how to use their technology to people who were also similarly, engineering based, right, in their degrees and in their experience. But this was all new. I mean, nobody had ever done it before. So I was like, okay, how do we get this thing to work? And then how do we explain how it works? And so it was pretty heady stuff.
Yeah, it still is an exciting time, just in different ways now. But I can remember using like Gopher Space. This will really date me. I had to use dial up to connect to it.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Crazy.
it was a whole different world. And I know you've been around for quite a while in that space as well. So what, in your experience, having been exposed to that world over a long period of time, what do you notice are some of the main things, the main blocks that women in like the science and technology sectors run into as they're moving forward with career aspirations?
Yeah. So there's what I find is interesting is that it depends on what role the person's playing at the company. If you're in marketing, it's a very different experience. And if you're in the tech part of the business, if you're in the engineering part, where I was kind of straddling both worlds because I was the technical communicator. So I was in the marketing side and I was in the engineering side. So I was in both sides.
Yeah, you had to speak both languages, so to speak.
And I was also connected with the QA side, right? So like the testing side and the user side. So I was in this fulcrum, this position of like being connected to a lot of different aspects of the company and then having to sort of merge all of that together in order to create communication that made everything make sense, whether it was marketing specs going out to companies that would be considering buying our stuff to, the actual documentation that was describing it. And it was startup stuff. So it was really fun because, I could just do whatever I wanted, really, mostly without a whole lot of big company corporate oversight and heaviness. So just put yourself in that mindset. And if you're in a company like that, that's really moving quickly and you're being innovative and just doing something like that. What's interesting is that in the position that I was in, I was able to move around a lot and interact with a lot of different people. And because I was quick and because I was very good at communicating and because I was determined, I was able to get a lot of respect from the different departments, right? And what I noticed is that not everybody had that level of confidence or go gettiness,
Yeah, go-getterness.
the go-getter.
Yes.
And the people who didn't would the women who didn't would really be like, either I am too mature for the stuff that's going on at this company, I'm just going to hide out in my office and do my work and try to ignore that it's happening. Or they were like feeling really beleaguered and not able to actually speak up about what was going on. And not having the confidence or having fear around being disrespected even more or being reassigned or even being laid off if they spoke up about what was going on. And
For example, what would some of those issues have looked like?
yeah, so like one example is that, when you're in a technology company, there's people coming from different parts of the world that have different cultural expectations around women in the workplace.
Yes.
So in my case, I ran across a situation where there was an engineer who was higher up in terms of the development side, and that he had hired him for his expertise, but his had a great deal of misogyny. In fact,
Mm.
he was very vocal about his misogyny, and he was telling the marketing person that I worked with that she was too stupid as a woman to understand what he was going to tell her about the product, so therefore he wasn't going to tell her anything. Meanwhile, she needed
Wow.
this is back when it was
Yeah.
blatant in your
Yeah.
face.
Uh-huh.
So like she needed that information to do her job. But he felt, because of the Stanford guys who really appreciated my ability to assimilate information really quickly and spit it back at them with different words, like I just have this ability to do that. I've always, cultivated that, that he felt, okay, well, if they like her, if these other guys like her, then I'll sit with her
She
and
might
tell
be the
her,
exception.
and
Yeah.
maybe she's the exception to the rule. So I ended up having to translate all that information to my marketing person.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I also found it extremely offensive to be around somebody who was misogynistic. And, there were lunch times when I went out with my boss, who was also a female, where we'd go around and jog around the peninsula area. We were out by the lakes, take a lunchtime and go run it off. And her advice to me was, don't let them see you cry.
Yeah.
And if you start to cry, lift your eyes up and just look at the ceiling, because that'll make the tears stop.
Wow. Okay, that's a useful tip.
But that was
But
the
yeah,
that was what it
that's
was at in
yeah.
1994. That's where it was at in the Silicon Valley, in terms of, you're talking about all the DEI initiatives that have gotten erased now, right? Because
Yeah.
we want to go back to the good old days where if we didn't feel like a woman could do the job, or we didn't feel like a person of color could do the job, we could just tell them blatantly, my opinion of you is that because of your sex or because of your color, you don't know what you're talking about and you're a
Right.
challenge and you're not a person of merit.
Yeah.
It's so offensive. And so one of the things I learned through that experience, and it took me, a lot of effort to learn this, was that this was his conditioning from his culture, from his family system, maybe
Right.
even, as I started looking into, learning
And
more about
was
souls.
reinforced as
Hmm.
he was growing up, right? Because when your culture has that predisposition, girls are not trained in this stuff, and therefore it's naturally reinforcing because they haven't been exposed to it, haven't been trained in it. Of course, they don't know about it, and it just creates this negative self-perpetuating cycle.
It does. And because in many cultures where there's a lot of heavy misogyny, including in places in this country where people use religion for that purpose, there's a expectation that women will be pretty, pleasing, and polite,
Mm,
and not speak up, not fight back, not say no. And there's this expectation of that. What I had going for me was Irish fire
well, and that was
and a feisty mom.
one thing that I noticed in corporate as well when I was doing my corporate thing. People really respected that assertiveness. And that was something I really had to learn to take on. I'm not naturally that way. And I can remember I had told my mom about some confrontation I'd had at the office, and she was sharing it with family friends who knew me when I was like knee high to a grasshopper. And they're like, Renee, really? She she took that stand? She's like, yeah. Like, wow, wouldn't have expected that at all. Because I was quiet and wouldn't have said boo to anyone.
Well, something that I always did is, and I also was very shy too, but I had this part of me that always went to whoever was in charge. Like I would go, even from a little kid, I don't know where I got this from, and if I had a problem with something, I would go to whoever the person was that was in charge And I would tell them what the thing was, and I would ask for their help. And so in that case, that's what I did. I went to the
Mhm.
president of the company. I knocked on his door. I said, "This is not okay with me. I will not be treated this way. He is offensive. You need to deal with it." And he did. He did deal with it. And this guy had to sit with me and explain how stuff worked until I understood it enough to write the documentation that then the marketing used. So
Yeah.
we negotiated that. But it was because I was refusing to be disrespected. And I
Mhm.
called in a greater authority than this person, and I made him have to comply.
Yeah.
And, I respected myself in that moment. Instead of backing down, I stood up for myself, not only myself, but it helped me because I wanted to stand up for my sisters too. Because
Yeah.
I didn't say, but I went to Smith College. So I went to an Ivy League women's college. So I had 4 years of their training in don't back down, speak your truth. And some of them way more radical than me. And I never was interested in being super radical. I'm not interested in being angry and burning bras and hurting men.
And
But
marching and all of that. Yes.
but what I am interested in is being respected.
Yes.
And I have been
Absolutely.
interested in that the whole time. And to be respected in this country, sometimes that means being assertive, as you mentioned. And being
Absolutely.
assertive when you're a soft spoken, gentle, tender person, as you have been, is a challenge for many women.
Yeah, it takes a while to learn how to do that. One of the main things I had to unlearn or relearn, however you want to describe it, was that assertiveness is not being mean and aggressive. If you're being mean and aggressive when you're being assertive, you might want to rethink your strategy on that, because there are ways that you can be very firm about what it is you want and need without being nasty.
It's interesting because I think part of this is learning how to be a woman with other women and to heal the sister wound so that we can
Mm.
have each other's backs instead of competing with each other, which is part of the conditioning,
Yeah,
is
it
that
is
we
part of what
compete.
we're raised with. Yeah,
And that's one of the
absolutely.
reasons I think in subconsciously I decided to go to an all women's college because I realized I didn't trust women and I didn't like them. And they were usually the ones stabbing me in the back in high school. And so
Yes.
I said to myself, for my own curriculum, I'm going to go learn how to love women. And I'm going to go to this all women's college. So I have no other choice but to make friends with women and understand them. That was the best thing I could have done because in my life, it's really served me to have relationships like with people like you, like other thought
Yes.
leaders, and we have each other's backs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember one of the first workshops that I did, a retreat. One of the ladies who came had had that same experience that you had had. There wasn't a sisterhood. Women were likely to stab you in the back, and she preferred to hang out with the men. And the retreat was literally all women. And by the end of the 10 days, I think it was, we were in Costa Rica, her testimony was like, I asked for a testimony and she sent me back like 3 pages. But the thing that really stood out in that for me was that she learned to be friends with women, and that she learned that women can support each other. It's not automatic because you're female, you're going to stab me in the back. And that just really warmed my heart.
Yeah, it's
So
powerful.
yeah. So we are up on our first break already. And when we come
Mhm.
back, what I'd like to do is discuss why women seem to be a bit addicted to accruing acronyms after their names. But over the break, what I'd like to invite you and the listeners to do, I don't know if you've done this yet, is to go out to, oh boy, the URL just went away. The Leadership Pitfall Quiz. And it's at leadershippitfallquiz.com. It takes about 2 minutes, which is basically the length of the commercial break, to go through it and to get your result. And it will tell you about your leadership animal and the pitfalls that come along with that leadership animal. And so I would love for everyone to go take that quiz. And then when we come back, we'll talk about how you work with your leadership animal and work around and with and over and through the pitfalls that come with it. So get your pen, get your piece of paper, leadershippitfallquiz.com, and hang with us. We'll be right back from the break.
Oh, check it out, but we're here. Tech is ours and we show no fear. No fear. No fear. No fear.
Thanks for hanging in with us through the break. This is Zofia Morales, and I am still here with Kerri Hummingbird. And before the break, as I indicated, we were going to discuss why women are addicted to accruing acronyms after their names. And what is your personal theory on that?
It has to do with proving ourselves. It has to do with proving ourselves because the conditioned thinking is that because women come from a different space than men, come from a different energetic pattern, a different thought process, a different way of moving through the world, that it doesn't match the masculine patriarchal expectations of the technology sector. And so because of that, there's this feeling of, well, I need to scientifically, logically, through your metrics, prove to you that I know what I'm talking about because I'm not doing it the way you do it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I could see that. My kind of my gut on it is it's one of these ways to gain that RESPECT because, as what do I want to say, the non-preferred gender for many, many centuries,
Right?
we do have something to prove in a lot of cases. And one of the ways to prove that is to document it scientifically, certified. There's a piece of paper here that says that I know my shit. That's kind of the long and the short of it. But I think we sometimes take that to too far of an extreme, because any employer who's done any hiring at all knows that there are people who look amazing on paper who have all these alphabets that cannot deliver results and perform on a day-to-day basis. And so there needs to, I think, be kind of a balance between, yeah, I've got the acronyms, but the more important thing is I've got this track record over here that shows that I improved systemic efficiency by 97%. I've got a Sigma 6 rating of 7 on this particular thing, which shouldn't be possible, but yet here it is, right? And really be able to, what do I want to say, trumpet out the successes that we have put together in the world that actually mean a lot more than the acronyms.
But see, like part of the reason why that's necessary is because there's been a systemic system of preferring men who are white for
Yes.
many positions, right? And so
Exactly.
that's why DEI was so important, is because we were giving different people an opportunity to get positions through the automatic bias that was present and has been present, because
Right.
it's never been based on merit. There's actually, really good world proof that you have to be twice as good as a woman to get the same job, and then you get it for less pay. That's been the situation, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we've sort of been trained to be complicit in that process subconsciously, because going back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's like, I will prove myself, and then the guys don't approach it that way. Okay, when a woman gets offered a job, we're like, oh, I'm so happy to be chosen. I will vindicate your confidence in me. Whereas the guy gets offered the job and he's like, that's great. The market for this is actually, $15,000 more than that. And, this company over here, when they made me an offer last week, offered me a $5,000 signing bonus. So he doesn't worry about oh, I'm so happy you chose me. It's like, okay, now that you've shown that you want me, here's the price you're going to pay. And as women, we're not trained to do that.
Yeah, I actually did that one time. I had a really unique opportunity where I was working for a startup company that was getting bought by a much bigger company. And I knew I didn't want to go to the much bigger company. I knew I wanted to take the leap into entrepreneurship, which I did for the rest of my career. But I said, I basically bargained it. I said, I know you guys need me because I'm the expert here. And so you're going to pay me an entrepreneurial salary now, and I'm going to work for myself. And they had to say yes.
And how did that feel as you were going through that process? What were some of the emotions that went on as you started to step into that and as that process unfolded?
Well, it felt really uncomfortable at first because I was basically saying, I'm not going to play this game. I don't have to take this job. I can just leave with all my knowledge and totally screw you guys. and and because I made myself invaluable, I had literally made myself indispensable. And I think that that is a position for the first time in my life I ever had that experience. And it felt good. It felt scary. It was right. I was 28 when I did that. And it did feel really scary because it felt like intimidating. I was negotiating, right? Assertively. And that wasn't comfortable for me to advocate for myself in that way. I had to learn how to do that. And this was one of the first times that I just did it. And I think I did call my dad and ask for advice. You know, how do I handle this? What do I do?
Yeah.
My dad gave me the advice, but I had the knowledge that even if I lost that job, I don't care. Because I know I'm going to find another job and I don't want to work for a big company. So I already knew I didn't want to continue in the way I was. So it didn't matter. I was either going to lose a job and be jobless for like a month until I found another job, or they were going to say yes to my request.
Yeah. And in which case you'd be getting paid what made more sense for you.
Exactly. And what happened was it translated into a launching point for a really, really successful entrepreneur business as a consultant that I got at one point I had 5 employees working for me, and I was like handling multiple jobs for all the people that got laid off there. They went someplace else. Right. And so I had all these contacts that knew that I could get the job done and do it well. And so I set myself up for a really good time for a while in my career, which is awesome. And so, yeah, I kind of proved that I could do that. And that did feel good. It felt really good.
I love that you recognized the moment and the opportunity that you really, quote unquote, had nothing to lose.
Yeah, I had nothing to lose. That's the thing I want to say is that part of what blocks us as women in stepping into our power is our fear about having something to lose, which gets you trapped in the system that they want you to be trapped
handcuffs. Golden handcuffs will pay you just enough to think you might make it and enough that you don't think you can make it without it.
And then what happens is that you get into a marriage and you have children, and now you're financially committed to
cars and mortgages and tuition and all the things. Yeah.
And you can feel very stuck and having to go along with things that your inner integrity, if you had freedom, would say, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not saying yes to that. We have to learn how to make decisions based on that inner sense first. And be courageous, be fearless about making those changes and trusting that if it's out of alignment for you in your integrity to stay in a situation because of the company and how it's operating or whatever the reason is, what they're asking you to do, how they're treating you. If it's out of alignment and you stay, a little piece of you is going to die every single day as you sit there and do that job. Yeah. And the way they smirk at you because they have the power over you. This is a power over game, you guys. All of our tech sector, all of our corporations, save a few, are invested in power over you, draining your power to get their needs met. It's very transactional. And so what you've got to do is you've got to advocate for yourself. And if you're in that situation where you feel like I've got to hold on to this because, then maybe it's really time to take a look at, do I trust myself?
Yeah. How do you start to build that trust in yourself and that courage to do these things? Because I don't know that either of us are really advocating that you walk in and go take this job and shove it like right now without any kind of a plan. Although your inner gut may tell you that's what you need to do. And if it does, I respect that, but I'm going to advocate that you do have a little bit of a plan before you take an action like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is something that maybe not everybody knows here, but if you heard my bio, I don't do high tech work anymore. I
Yeah.
transitioned in 2012 out of high tech work. Actually, it was a little bit later than that, 2016, out of high tech work into being a medicine person, a healer, a coach, a mentor, a messenger, best-selling books, podcasts. And it was difficult, definitely, to make that transition. But this is where, if you follow the integrity you feel in your heart, you follow that passion, that knowing, that sense in your heart, and sometimes synchronistic things that just line up and you go, I just know I need to do this.
Yeah.
If you follow that, what's going to happen is better things.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you might not
Uh,
see it coming. You
Yeah,
probably
well,
can't anticipate it.
a lot of times you don't, right? Because the normal psychological thing when you lose something or something goes away is, oh my gosh, I've lost this huge thing, whatever it is, the career, the marriage, whatever the thing that went away was. But what happens is it leaves your hands empty for the thing you've been desiring to show up because you can't grab
Mhm.
something new when your hands are full.
And I wanted to answer that question because you can't grab something new when your hands are full. And yes, set yourself up for success.
Yeah.
Like in my case, things conspired to set me up for success in that my company I had been working for remotely, because I went back to work for a company after my divorce, and it was my biggest contract, and they offered me a full-time job. And you know how you are at the end of a divorce, you go,
Yeah.
thank you, because I don't
Yes.
have the mojo to go get another job right now. You need me.
Exactly. Anything you can throw my way, I'm just
Thank
emotionally
you.
wiped out.
Yeah, and I told my boss, he was a very cool guy. I said, listen, I'm doing this shamanic training work. I'm learning how to be a healer. I'm healing myself. I'm really invested in this. And so I'm going to need this time to go to Peru, and I'm going to need this time to go do this. And I'm starting my business as a healer. So I'm going to need, so I was transparent and I said, this is what I need, and I'm
Yeah.
going to
And you
deliver you.
advocated for yourself up front.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
after about a year of that, basically the company itself went through some transitions and said, we're going to move all of our tech writers to Ireland. And Kerri, we know you're not going to go there because your kids have to stay in Texas. So they gave me a 1 year warning of a layoff, right? So I had
Nice.
1 year ramp. I was getting paid, I was doing my job. My boss knew I was going to networking meetings, and like trying to build my business as fast as I could. And because I knew I had a runway and I was transparent about what I wanted to do, and I got my work done. And I had
Yeah.
to work really hard to do all of that at the same time. I had to build a new path while honoring the old path, while moving forward. But it got me where I needed to be. It got me there enough that I could survive with my kids as a single mom.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the interesting thing was your hands were quote unquote technically empty a year before they were actually empty.
Yeah.
And, there are two things you can do with that information. You can accelerate into that runway, or you can sit down and be depressed that this ending is coming. And one is not even mutually exclusive of the other, right? Because it's normal to grieve for something that's going away. And so if you've had this experience where you've gotten this terrible news that your job is going away, you're going to be downsized, or you have already been downsized, and you're sitting on the couch depressed, eating out of that pint of Oreo ice cream, that's okay for right now. It's all right for you to mourn that for a little while. That's normal. That's healthy.
It
But
is.
then at some point, you got to grab those bootstraps.
Yeah. And you've got to close the back doors. Like,
Yeah.
it's really important to close the back doors. So for me, for example, I went into a completely different field, right? Like
Yeah.
technology and being a healer is not the
They're
same.
kind of at polar ends of the spectrum. It's an interesting balance.
Exactly. And I didn't know I was going to be a healer until I knew,
Yeah.
and then I followed that and I said, that is what I need to do. And look, I've got all these best-selling books. I've got a community of people I teach how to do this. I'm a podcaster. I'm well respected. I'm asked to come and speak a lot for these different kinds of opportunities. So my wisdom, I want people to hear this, as a person, is respected.
Yes.
Not because I have a lot of little letters after my name, but because I am Kerri Hummingbird.
Yes.
And that can happen for every single woman that leans in to trust your path and take it out of the system. And even if you're still in the system,
Or to
taking
disrupt
it
the
out of the
system.
system.
Exactly. There's
Your
nothing
mind.
that says you have to become a healer, right? If you want to create your own tech, whatever it is, and
Whatever
disrupt
it
the
is.
industry, that fabulous. Follow that. We're not
Yeah.
saying you have to, run off and become a shamanic healer.
No, it's not about that, but it's like
it's about following that intuition
and taking your mind out of belief with the paradigm that's telling you you have to be like this with golden handcuffs.
Yes.
Taking your mind out of that paradigm and showing up. Do we have to do the inner work to show up to live a powerful life that you choose, whether it's in the tech sector or not, it doesn't matter, but at least following your own guidance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. So, what is one superpower that women have that if we were to realize it would change how we engaged with the world? Because I always love getting to that moment of the script flipping, of that light bulb going off, of the realization of the broader vista arriving, the unwritten rules being seen and discarded.
It's actually, let's flip the script, being able to feel and perceive through feeling. That actually is a superpower because we can feel what's going on in the space. We have spidey senses. We can feel if there's been an argument in a room. We can feel if there's some kind of weird agenda going on. We can feel if someone's being dishonest. We can feel that. And because we can feel that,
emotional intelligence.
That emotional intelligence is a huge superpower when you lean into it and stop shaming yourself for being a woman and having emotional intelligence.
I love that. So we are up on our second break. And for those of you who didn't get a chance to take the leadership pitfall quiz on the last break, here's your opportunity to do that. If you did do that already, what I'd invite you to do is to spend a few minutes around the unwritten rules you may be following in your life right now. The I must be invited to take on that project. The I must be invited to get that promotion. I just need to be grateful for the 2% raise that they gave me and not advocate for anything more. Look at some of these areas where you feel like, you know what, I'd like to, but I can't because. And capture what that unwritten rule is that you've been following and spend some time looking at that and asking, is it really a truth? And hang with us. We'll be right back from the break.
Oh, check the loud, the wolf here. Tech is ours and we show no fear. No fear. No fear. No fear.
Welcome back from the break. This is Zofia Morales. I am here with the wonderful and amazing Kerri Hummingbird, and we are fixing to discuss the results that she got when she took the Leadership Pitfall Quiz that you can find at leadershippitfallquiz.com. If you haven't had a chance to take that, go ahead and do it now while we're having this discussion so you can identify what your leadership animal is. So, Kerri, drum roll, please. What was your result? What did you get on the quiz?
Well, I told you already, and I'm not sure I still have it up, but it's the rhino.
The renegade rhino.
Renegade rhino.
Yeah, I love me a renegade rhino. And I think a lot of us mature to the renegade rhino at some point. Just to fill in for everybody out there who's taken the quiz, there are 4 leadership animals that I talk about. One is the lone wolf. I was one of these very early in my career. Don't give me any direct reports. I want nothing to do with anybody else's stuff. Just let me do my thing. And then there is the octopus, which is sort of got the tentacles in everything, needs to know everything that's going on in the team, who's doing what, and is it all on time and on schedule, and are you doing it the way I want to do it? And then the third type is the golden retriever. And that's the, I just want everybody to be happy. I want to make everybody happy. And each of these animals has some amazing, amazing abilities that it brings with it. The lone wolf tends to be like really dependable and gives you all kinds of wonderful, well thought out, well delivered work, but doesn't necessarily play so well with others or sometimes has trouble communicating even with others. Part of the reason perhaps we decide to be lone wolves instead of part of a pack like normal wolves would do. The octopus tends to know exactly what's going on. There's nothing in a project that they're running that is out of their control, but they tend to make their people nuts because your folks don't have autonomy to bring their skill sets and their gifts to the project and enhance it in ways that perhaps you might not have thought of. And so that's one of the pitfalls of being an octopus. And then the golden retriever. I was a golden retriever before I was a lone wolf. That was before I entered corporate, as a matter of fact. And you can really burn yourself out trying to make everybody else happy because you can't make anyone feel anything in particular. That's entirely under their control. And it took me like 20 years to figure that out.
Yeah, that's challenging being a pleaser.
Yeah, it really is hard being a pleaser. And my golden retrievers tend to be the pleasers. And I find even some people who've evolved their style into like a renegade rhino, but who were once golden retrievers, still see themselves as golden retrievers.
Yeah, I had a lot of golden retriever in me.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah,
And a little bit of lone wolf too.
exactly. And the renegade rhino is kind of where we tend to mature into. It's the, you know what, I don't really care what you think attitude. A lot of times it's like, this is it. This is how I think it should be done. This is the vision. Come on, team, we're going to go take that mountain. Okay. And if you were a golden retriever, perhaps in your former life, one of the beautiful things about that evolution is you still bring in some of those pathways of communication into that leadership style, whereas someone who's naturally a renegade rhino has a tendency to like not want to hear anything that he has to say. I've got my vision. I know where I'm going. Let's go do it. Right.
Yeah, that's the pitfall.
You're with me or you're against me. Right.
I'm a manifestor of my design. So I am geared to be that person that just says, this is what we're doing. I'm informing you. Let's go.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I learned along the way of doing that people don't always like that.
Don't tell me how I'm going to do.
Might put up a little bit of resistance.
Yes.
So it's always good to receive everyone's perspective and to answer questions and make a, kind of figure out where people are at, and then to build some consensus about it and some understanding with it. And usually I find if I've done all that and I take into account everyone's perspective, usually it works out pretty well and people just go and do it. They just hop on board and say, yeah, it sounds great. Now I understand it. Now I'm on board with it. I agree. Right. And then it's like beautiful.
Exactly. Because they had a chance to be heard. They had a chance to air their concerns and to gain some understanding for how those concerns are being addressed, and whether the concerns really are going to apply or not. Right. Because sometimes we make up stories that have nothing to do with what's actually happening.
Well, and there's miscommunication all the time.
Right? Oh,
yeah. Because as a manifestor, my job is to inform people. And sometimes when I inform people, I'm not really understanding the gaps in my communication until somebody comes back and says, did you mean this? And I'm like, whoa, I didn't even know you were.
Where did that even come from?
Yes. That, okay, thanks for sharing that. I didn't know that that's how it landed. So like really checking in with people, how does it land with you is one thing I've learned how to do. I've practiced instead of I'm just like a renegade rhino, busting up the entire china shop because I'm just in a mood. It's like I've learned to hang back a little bit and be a little bit more restraint with it, be more measured, check in here and there, have little conversations to see how it will land in advance before I make some big informing, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Here's the finished vision.
Here's what we're all going to say yes to. And everyone's like, what?
So you mentioned previously backdoors and closing the backdoors. And I think as a renegade rhino, you're probably pretty efficient at that. But explain to some of the rest of us who I'm one of these people who likes to keep my options open as long as I can.
Well, while you're, when like I knew that I needed to take the leap, right? I could see the signs that it was being set up for me to make a transition out of technology, out of corporate into being my own entrepreneur of healing and medicine this time. I didn't see the whole path. Like I didn't know I was going to start a community, intermedicine community. I didn't know any of that, right? I just knew I'm going to be a healer. That's all I know. And so I was taking that first step. And it was a big step to take because it's so countercultural,
It's radically different.
radical. People have religious reasons for not agreeing with it. People have like atheist reasons for not, and scientific reasons for thinking it's bogus. And there's a lot of people that don't understand it, right? So
Right.
it was a huge move to make. And when I changed my name to Kerri Hummingbird on LinkedIn, that was my like, this is happening.
Your stake in the ground.
like I don't care what anybody says about it. I know in my heart and soul that this is who I am. And now that I know who I am, I'm not going to put some other name on my LinkedIn profile to make it somebody else. No, I know who I am. This is who I am. And I'm going to put it, and I'm going to put my stake in the sand, and you guys can think whatever you want to think, but eventually you'll see.
Yeah.
Because I knew that if I followed my course as a person of integrity and I stayed the course, eventually people would come around and they'd go, oh, that's what she's doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And names are so profoundly powerful. My birth name, Renee, means reborn. And I've done that several times in my life. So in many ways, it was very prescient of my parents. But when I decided to walk two paths, the spiritual and the scientific at the same time, I searched for my new name, which turned out to be Zofia. And just finding that made a huge difference in my world. Not that this has anything to do one way or the other. Well, it must, because I'm talking about it for some reason.
It actually does.
Yeah.
I think it has to do with owning your your chosen identity. The and the name that calls forth, that evokes that essence that is you, is important to stand in that and to claim it. And it's a bold declaration in a world that expects you to go, to have titles that they give you, to follow procedures that they give you,
to fit into the boxes that they've defined for you,
fit into all the boxes that they gave you. And then when you say, no, actually, this is authentic for me. And eventually people were like, that knew me in high tech, were like, of course that's your name. Because we saw it in you the whole time, but we didn't know what we were seeing until you called it out and you stood in it. And then now we can see who you are. And does that mean I'm going to get tech jobs? I don't know. Probably somebody would hire me, but I wouldn't even want a job like that right now because this is what I'm doing. And that's what I mean, like by closing the back doors, is that did I have some fear, when I had to make my mortgage payment and I've got two little kids depending on me going to school, and I've got to make sure I can pay the mortgage and have food on the table. And I've already used up most of my 401k for my training, right? And for my own growth. Post-divorce, like I'd already spent that money because I needed to have training to become the person I needed to be, and I knew I needed it. And so, there were moments where it was like, maybe I'm just going to have to go get another job, or maybe I'm going to have to go get another contract, or maybe I'm going to have to go dip my toe back into something I know is not right for me. And every time I would shut the back door, I would say, nope, we're not doing that. So what else? Get busy.
Yeah. I had one of those moments actually not very long ago, and I was talking to a coach friend of mine about it. And I'm like, I've really thought about, looking at what's out there and making some inquiries. And I sat with it for a while and came to the realization that I'm really no longer employable. I just cannot do that anymore.
No.
There are dozens of other things I will do, but taking a W-2 job for someone else it's no longer the thing.
I can't do it either. And it's because I just don't fit there. But I
Yeah.
can help people who are in that model, right? Like
Oh,
I'm happy
absolutely. I know how
to
to
help people
navigate that
navigate that
model
model
really well.
and to help
I
you
set
navigate it.
land speed records for
You can stay in it if
promotions
you
and
want,
raises and
whatever
yeah.
you want, but if you want to navigate it better, I can help you do that using these tools I've learned, and they work. I've got clients I've served that are in pharmaceuticals, which is slightly adjacent, right? Pharmaceuticals,
Yeah, it's
and
just a different, it's
same
science tech
ladders,
as opposed to tech. My husband is in pharmaceuticals.
same thing.
Indeed.
It's like there's
Yep.
ladders and there's rules and there's like all this kind of corporate politics and hidden agendas and so yeah, like learning how to navigate that. And I want to say that the most important thing is to follow the thing you know is right for you, because if you follow that, as Sophia and I have done, you're going to be so much happier inside yourself. And yeah, you'll have to move through some fear. And yes, you'll have to move through some discomfort. You might have to give up some things. Like I had to give up some spa days and I had to give up things that I used to have. I had to give up those things temporarily while I built my business. I had to give up a lot of free time while I did both. But as you step on your path and you stay true to yourself, which is the whole point of it, I think, is to stay true to yourself and true to your heart and follow that inner knowing, things open up for you that you would never have imagined would be your destiny. And wouldn't you want to know what that is versus the road you've already walked for most of your life so far?
Yeah,
It's like that is a
exactly.
very uninteresting road.
Well, and here's the thing, right? There's always this balance in life, right? And I refer to it when I talk about, balancing the scientific with the metaphysical and that sort of thing. But there's also the practical versus the aspirational, right? And it's normal to swing back and forth between those two things. And I know a lot of times when we have these conversations, it's like, you should aspire to this and you should follow your bliss and you should, but if you're also called that you need to do something very practical for a certain period of time to do it, you don't get demerits for that. You got to do what a girl's got to do.
Like I held down the
Yeah.
job, right? I held down the job for the whole year I was getting laid off.
Yep.
And I simultaneously built a new business with everything I had. So I would be ready to run when that money ran out, So
Yeah, exactly.
practical. You got to give it your all. You can't stand back and say, well, maybe I'll do it. No, I'm doing
Yeah.
it 100% Jaguar. I'm doing that thing.
Straightforward. Absolutely. Love it. Renegade Rhino. Full charge. I love it. We are down to our last couple of minutes here on the show. What do you have to say to somebody who feels like they're on the edge of taking that leap of faith, of starting that startup business that's been calling to them, of, stepping away from the role that they've been in as an employee and moving to a consultant, or whatever that transition is, stepping out of a marriage and becoming a single mother? What are your words to someone who's in that moment of decision?
It's a really good question. And what I would say is, because everyone's situation is so unique, is that the thing to really do is to get good at getting quiet in yourself, moving yourself out of fear, back into groundedness, quiet, trust, however you can get there. Really learning how to meditate, contemplate, get quiet, or have a coach or somebody help you with that, and get a really clear answer within yourself, not only of the decision that you're going towards, but also the actions you would take to support you to get there. And you might only get today's actions or tomorrow's actions. And so really learning how to keep checking in with yourself, to keep on track on your golden path towards what is going to fulfill you, that I think is the most thing. And it'll be different for every situation. So the most important thing is to check in with yourself and keep following the guidance that you're getting and trust it, even if it sounds insane, crazy, and like you're going to change your name on LinkedIn to something wild. So
Yeah.
follow it, trust it, do it.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Kerri. I think it's been a really wide-ranging conversation.
It has.
And my sincerest hope to everyone who's joined us here today is that it provided some insight for you. Not necessarily that you follow any particular piece of advice or experience that we've put out there, but that it's given you something to have perspective from, something you can push off of and go, ooh, this is for me. Ooh, this is not for me. Because decision is your friend. Indecision is a crappy decision. So what I would hope for you is that you found something here you can push off from today. And until next week, go out, be wild, be amazing, and be wonderful.